Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into a verse attributed to Adi Shankaracharya.
Oh, this is a good one.
It is. I'm excited for this. For anyone who might not be familiar, Shankaracharya was this incredibly influential Indian philosopher.
Yeah, he was a major figure in reviving the Vedanta school of thought.
Exactly. And just to give a little context for our listeners, Vedanta is all about understanding the nature of reality and the self, like really getting to the heart of who we are.
And Shankaracharya was a master at explaining these complex spiritual concepts, making them accessible to everyone.
Right, which is what we're hoping to do today. Make this ancient wisdom relevant to your life, make you think a little differently about the world.
Absolutely.
So this particular verse we're looking at, it's known for its profound questions, the kind that really make you stop and re-examine your everyday view of things.
It definitely shakes things up.
It does. We're talking questions like, whose wife is she? And who are you, really?
Intrigued you. Those are the kinds of questions that keep you up at night.
I know, right? Okay, so let's get to the verse itself. Here it is in its entirety. Whose wife is she and whose son are you? This world is indeed very strange. Who are you? Where do you come from? Contemplate the truth, O brother.
Just 4 lines, but wow, there's so much packed in there.
Every word is carefully chosen. It's almost like a philosophical riddle, isn't it?
Right. It is. It really grabs your attention right from the start with that line, whose wife is she and whose son are you? It's so simple and direct, but then it hits you with this deeper meaning.
It is. It sounds like something you might overhear at a family gathering, but it makes you question those very relationships, those labels we use to define ourselves and others.
And that's what Shankaracharya is doing here, right?
Absolutely. He's using these everyday relationships like husband and wife, parent and child, to point out how much we cling to roles and labels and how those roles are constantly changing.
It's true. I mean, you think about it. Someone is a son, then a husband, then a father.
And on and on. Yeah. So it's like he's saying these labels, they don't really capture the essence of who we truly are. They're just temporary.
Exactly. They're just roles we play on the stage of life.
So where does Vedanta fit into all of this? Does it offer a different way of seeing ourselves, something beyond those temporary labels?
It does. Vedanta suggests that our true self, what's called the Atman, is beyond those roles. It's this eternal, unchanging essence that exists at our core.
Okay, so it's not just about who we are in relation to others, but about who we are at our very core.
Exactly.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So if we strip away all these labels, all these roles, what are we left with? Does that mean we lose our individuality?
Not at all. Think of it like this. You're a unique expression of that universal consciousness. Like each wave in the ocean is distinct, but it's still part of the vastness of the ocean.
I love that analogy. It's actually quite reassuring. Like we're both unique, part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And this verse is challenging us to recognize both of those truths.
Okay, I'm with you so far. Let's move on to the next line, which really grabbed my attention. This world is indeed very strange. What makes it so strange in this context? I mean, we all know the world can be a pretty crazy place, but what's the deeper meaning here?
Right. Well, think about it. We crave permanence. We want things to stay the same, but the world is constantly changing.
That's true.
We cling to people, we cling to things, knowing deep down that nothing lasts forever. And that inherent paradox, that tension between our desire for permanence and the reality of impermanence, that's what makes the world so strange.
That's a really good point. I never thought of it that way. But it's true. It's almost like we're living in this constant state of paradox.
We are. And then there's this concept of Maya, which adds another layer of strangeness to the mix.
Okay, Maya. That's one of those terms I've heard before, but I'm not sure I completely understand it. Is it kind of like an illusion?
Yes, exactly. Maya refers to this illusory nature of our perception. It's like the world we see, with all its beauty and chaos, is like this veil covering the true nature of reality. And we get so caught up in that projected image that we forget it's not the whole story.
This is where it gets really interesting. I'm always fascinated by these mind-bending ideas. Can you give me an example of what you mean by the illusory nature of our perception?
Sure. Imagine a movie projector. It casts these images onto a screen, right?
Yeah.
And it creates a whole world that seems so real. But we know, deep down, it's just latent shadows. Similarly, Vedanta suggests that our senses, our minds, they create an illusion of a separate, solid world, even though at a deeper level, everything is interconnected.
Wow, that's quite a shift in perspective. So we're all essentially walking around in this projected reality.
In a way, yes. And that brings us to the next line of the verse, who are you? Where do you come from? It's prompting us to look beyond that projected reality, to question the very foundation of our existence.
It's like taking the red pill,
Right.
stepping outside the matrix.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not just about questioning our roles in the world, but questioning our very existence.
Precisely.
And this is where the concept of the Atman comes back in.
Yes, it does.
So we're not just these physical bodies or even just our thoughts and feelings. There's something more fundamental at our core.
Something eternal, something unchanging.
This is a lot to take in, but I'm really intrigued.
It is a lot to take in.
Okay, so before we move on, let me just make sure I'm following you. Shankaracharya is saying we're more than just those temporary identities, that the world is not exactly as it appears, and that there's a deeper truth we can access if we're willing to question everything. Did I get that right?
You absolutely did, and that's a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore how to actually apply these profound ideas to our lives.
Okay, so we've really unpacked this verse, and I gotta say, Shankaracharya, he doesn't pull any punches, does he?
No, he really gets to the heart of things.
He does. But how do we take these, pretty heady concepts and actually apply them to our daily lives? That's what I'm really curious about.
That's the real challenge, right? Bridging the gap between this ancient wisdom and modern living.
Exactly. Because it's easy to get caught up in the intellectual side of things, but what does it all mean for how we, navigate relationships, deal with stress, find a sense of purpose?
It affects everything, really.
It does. So let's start with the idea of attachment, because those opening lines, whose wife is she and whose son are you, they really point to how much we define ourselves by our relationships and the roles we play.
It's true. We get so caught up in those labels.
We do. Like, I catch myself doing it all the time,
Yeah.
I'm a good friend, I'm a reliable colleague, a loving partner. These labels, they feel important to me, but I think Shankaracharya is suggesting they're not the whole story.
Right. Vedanta suggests that a lot of our suffering comes from clinging too tightly to these temporary roles and identities. And it's not just about people, it's about possessions, achievements, even our ideas about who we are.
Wait, are you saying we shouldn't care about our loved ones or strive for success? That seems a bit extreme, doesn't it?
No, it's not about becoming indifferent or detached from life. It's more about recognizing that everything is in constant flux. Change is inevitable. And when we resist that truth, when we try to hold on to things too tightly, that's when we create suffering for ourselves.
Okay, I see the nuance there. So it's not about erasing our feelings or denying our human experience, but about shifting our perspective.
Right.
Like, instead of gripping things so tightly, we hold them with a more open hand, knowing they might change or even slip away.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective, it can be incredibly liberating. It allows us to experience joy and love more fully because we're not so afraid of losing them. You appreciate things for what they are in this moment without clinging to them as if they'll last forever.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like, instead of constantly fearing the future or dwelling on the past, we're more present, more grounded in the now.
And that brings us back to the concept of Maya, which we touched on earlier. Remember that movie projector analogy?
Yeah, I do.
Vedanta suggests that we often mistake that projected image, that illusion, for reality itself. We get so caught up in the show that we forget it's all just light and shadows.
Right. So if we're living in this projected reality, how do we see beyond the illusion? Do we have to, become hermits and meditating caves to escape Maya's grip?
Not necessarily. It's more about cultivating awareness. Just like understanding how a movie projector works doesn't ruin the enjoyment of a film, understanding Maya doesn't mean we can't enjoy life. It just adds another dimension to our experience.
I like that. So knowing it's an illusion, it doesn't make the world any less beautiful or meaningful.
Right.
In fact, it might even enhance our appreciation for it.
It could, absolutely.
Okay, that's cool. And this is where that line, "Contemplate the truth, O brother," comes in, right?
Yes.
It's like this call to action, an invitation to really engage in this process of self-inquiry, of peeling back those layers of illusion to discover what lies beneath.
To see things as they truly are.
Exactly. Okay, but self-inquiry, it sounds a bit vague. What does that actually look like in practice? Is it about meditating for hours on end or reading stacks of ancient texts?
Those can be helpful tools, but self-inquiry can also happen in the midst of everyday life. It's about cultivating a sense of presence, of paying attention to your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations, without judgment.
Oh, okay. So it's like bringing that mindfulness into every moment, even the mundane ones. Like, instead of, mindlessly scrolling through my phone while waiting in line, I could use that time to just, observe my breath or notice the sensations in my body.
Exactly, you got it. It's about turning those everyday moments into opportunities for self-discovery. And it doesn't have to be this formal practice. You can do it while you're washing dishes, walking the dog, even stuck in traffic.
That's actually really encouraging. It makes this whole idea of self-inquiry feel more accessible, less intimidating, you know? It's not about escaping the world, but about bringing that awareness into everything we do.
And as we do that, we start to notice patterns in our thinking, our reactions, our behaviors. We see how often we get caught up in the illusion, how we create suffering for ourselves through our attachments and aversions.
So it's like we're becoming more self-aware, more attuned to our own inner workings, and that awareness, in turn, gives us more choice in how we respond to life's challenges.
Exactly. That's the real power of this verse. It's not just about intellectual understanding. It's about empowering us to live more freely, more authentically.
This is starting to feel like a real game changer. But we've been talking a lot about the self and our internal experience. What about our actions in the world? How does this understanding of Maya and the Atman affect how we interact with others, how we make decisions?
That's where the concept of dharma comes in. It's a big word, but it basically refers to living in alignment with our true nature, our purpose. Vedanta suggests that when we understand who we truly are, beyond the illusions of the ego, our actions naturally become more harmonious, more in sync with the flow of life.
Okay, so it's not just about inner transformation. It's about bringing that transformation into our outer world.
Yes.
Like if I'm less attached to outcomes, maybe I'm more willing to take risks, to pursue my passions without that fear of failure.
You could be.
And my interactions with others, maybe they become more compassionate, more understanding, because I'm not so caught up in my own ego's needs and desires.
That's the idea.
This is all starting to click into place. It's like this verse is offering a whole new way of being in the world. But I have to ask, if we're all part of this interconnected reality, this universal consciousness, why is there so much suffering in the world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's something that philosophers and spiritual seekers have been wrestling with for centuries. And it's complex. There are no easy answers. But Vedanta does offer some insights that might help us understand it a little better.
Okay, I'm all ears. Because if we're all connected, it seems like we should be experiencing more harmony, more love, less conflict.
Right. The idea is that while we're all ultimately expressions of the same divine essence, we're also on these individual journeys of evolution. And part of that journey involves navigating this illusion of separation, experiencing the full spectrum of human emotions, and ultimately realizing our interconnectedness.
So it's like we're all at different stages of waking up to this reality.
Yes.
Some of us are still deeply asleep in the illusion, while others are starting to glimpse the truth.
That's a great way to put it. And the more we awaken to our true nature, the more we can contribute to the collective awakening.
That's actually a really hopeful perspective. It's like we have the power to not only transform our own lives, but to make a positive impact on the world around us.
Exactly.
I love that. And that's what's so inspiring about this verse. It's not just a philosophical treatise, it's a call to action, an invitation to embark on this journey of self-discovery that can ultimately lead to greater freedom, love, and fulfillment for ourselves and for all beings.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. We've covered so much ground, from the depths of Maya to the heights of Dharma. But I have one more burning question. What about liberation, or moksha, as it's called in Vedanta? Is that something we can achieve in this lifetime? Or is it a goal for many lifetimes to come?
That's a big question, and one that we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, we're back and ready to dive into the final part of our exploration of Shankaracharya's verse. We've covered some pretty mind-blowing concepts, Maya, Atman, Dharma. But there's one big question still hanging in the air. What about moksha, that elusive state of liberation that Vedanta points towards?
Ah, yes, moksha, the ultimate goal, the culmination of this whole journey of self-discovery. But you're right, it's often misunderstood. People get a little confused about it.
I know I do. I mean, whenever I hear the word liberation, I picture like monks meditating on mountaintops, totally detached from the world. Is that what moksha is all about? Checking out of life completely?
Not exactly, no. It's not about escaping the world or denying our human experience. It's more about freedom from suffering, freedom from the limitations of our ego, freedom from this cycle of birth and death that keeps us bound to this realm of illusion.
Okay, so it's not about physically escaping. So what does it look like to achieve liberation while still living in this world?
Well, imagine this, a drop of water falling into the ocean.
Hey.
It merges with this vastness. It loses its individual identity, but it's still part of something much greater.
So it's like dissolving the boundaries of our individual ego, recognizing that we're all part of this interconnected web of existence. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And when that happens, we experience this profound sense of peace, unity, and freedom. We're no longer bound by those fears and desires and attachments that create suffering.
That sounds pretty amazing. But how do we actually get there? Is there a step-by-step guide to achieving moksha? Like a roadmap?
There's no one-size-fits-all path, unfortunately. But Vedanta suggests that it involves this process of purification, of refining our understanding of ourselves and the world. It's about aligning our thoughts, our words, and our actions with our true nature, with that spark of divinity that resides within us all.
So it's not just about intellectual understanding, but about actually living in alignment with these truths.
It is, yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like this is a lifelong process, not a destination that we arrive at overnight,
You
right?
got it. It's a journey of unfolding, of gradually peeling away those layers of illusion to reveal the radiant truth of who we really are.
Earlier I was a little skeptical about the idea of liberation. It just seems so abstract, so far removed from daily life. But the more we talk about it, the more I see how relevant it actually is. It's not about escaping the world, but about showing up more fully, more authentically, maybe even more compassionately.
That's the beautiful paradox of moksha. It's about transcending those limitations of the ego, not about denying our human experience. It's about embracing life in all its messiness and beauty with a heart full of love and understanding.
I like that. It's like we're upgrading our operating system, expanding our capacity for joy, peace, and connection. And even if we don't fully achieve moksha in this lifetime, every step we take in that direction, it makes our lives richer. And honestly, it makes the world a better place.
I agree with you, and that brings us back to the power of Shankaracharya's verse. It's a wake-up call. It's a reminder that there's so much more to life than what meets the eye. It encourages us to question our assumptions, to really delve into the depths of our being, and to discover that boundless potential that lies within.
So inspiring. So for our listeners who are feeling inspired and maybe want to explore these ideas further, what advice would you give them? Where should they start?
Well, the beauty of Vedanta is that it's a living tradition. It's accessible to anyone with a sincere desire to seek truth. You could start by exploring some of the ancient texts, like the Upanishads. They offer these really profound insights into the nature of reality and the self.
And what about more modern approaches? Are there teachers or resources that can help translate these ancient teachings into a more contemporary context?
Absolutely. There are countless books and courses and communities that offer contemporary perspectives on Vedanta. And don't underestimate the power of meditation and mindfulness practices. Those can be so helpful for quieting the mind, for cultivating self-awareness, and for opening you to these deeper levels of understanding.
It sounds like there's a whole world of exploration waiting for anyone who's curious enough to dive in. And the best part is you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
There's this whole rich tapestry of wisdom and support available to guide you on your journey.
That's the beauty of it all. So listeners, as we wrap up our deep dive into Shankaracharya's profound verse, remember this. The journey of self-discovery is an adventure worth taking. It's a path that can lead to greater freedom, love, and fulfillment, not just for ourselves, but for all beings.
What a great way to end our exploration. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we did. And remember, the truth is always within you, waiting to be discovered.